Hey everyone, welcome to WittCode, where in this video I'm going to be going over var versus let versus const in JavaScript. So the keywords let and const were introduced in ES6, which was published in June 2015. If you don't know, ES6 refers to the version 6 of ECMA script. ECMA stands for European Computer Manufacturers Association and is essentially just a standard for programming languages to follow. Before ES6 though, there was only var. But anyway, these keywords added a lot of useful functionality. To demonstrate this functionality, I'll be comparing var, const, and let in three different categories: scope, which is arguably the most important, hoisting, and whether a variable declared with let, const, or var can be redeclared or updated. So let's start by comparing the scope of let, const, and var. Scope essentially means where variables are allowed to be used or where they are available. The scope for var can be either functional scope or global scope, depending on where it is declared. So when a variable is declared with var outside a function, it is said to be global scope. So let me show you this. So let's create a variable here, just call it var. Let's call it my var, set it equal to, this is a globally scoped var declared variable. And then let's just log this out to the console. So log my var. You can see this is a globally scoped var declared variable. And the reason it's globally scoped once again is because it is outside of a function. And now let's see what happens if we create a function and try to access this variable. So I'm just going to create a function called myFunction like this, and I'm just going to log my var, and then of course let's call my function here, and I'm also going to delete this log message here so I don't get this mixed up. Then let's press save. And as expected, we can access the variable, this variable here, from within the function. And this is because a variable declared with var outside a function block is available for use in the whole window. In other words, global variables belong to the JavaScript window object and can be used and changed by all scripts in the page and window. To show you this even better, let me set a breakpoint in here. So let me open up this, make this bigger. Let's set a breakpoint in here. Let's run this program again. And now let's check window. So this is our JavaScript window object, and my var, because it's global, should be attached to this object. So if we do say window.myvar, you can see we can access it here. And also, just a quick side note, global variables live until the page is discarded, such as when you navigate to another page or close the window. So if we navigate out of this page or close down this browser window, then the global variables for window would be discarded. So let me play through this and go back to our console. And then I'm also going to comment this out because now let's see a function scope variable with var. So function scoped means that the variable is declared within a function. So within here, for example, let's do var my function var equal to, this is a function scoped var like this. Oh, I didn't get rid of this breakpoint. Let's also just turn these off. Let me play this again. Refresh the page. And of course I need to change this to my function var. So let's refresh again. And then also I'm going to, let's just go back to the console here. And we can see, of course, it gets printed because we're calling it from within the function. But now let's try and access it from outside the function. So then here, let's do console.log my function var like this. And you can see we get a reference error, an uncaught reference error. So you can tell that function scoped also means that the variable is available and can be accessed only within that function. So this variable here, declared with var, is only accessible within my function, which is why we get an error if we try and access it here. But now, let me show you one of the main reasons that let and const were created. So let me go in here. I'm just going to delete all this, and I'm going to say, I'm going to uncomment this here. And now I'm just going to say if true, then we're going to say var, my var equals, this is my var in a block like this. And then down here, let's log out my var and see what we get. And so you can see that it was this declaration here this is my var in a block that is what is printed to the console. So remember, var variables can be global or function scoped, and here my var is not defined in a function, but rather in an if statement or a block. And because it isn't defined in a function, it will be global scoped, which so essentially it'll be added to the window object again. And this isn't a problem if you wanted my var to be redefined, but you can see that it could be a problem if you didn't realize that my var had already been defined. So say you're using my var in other parts of your code outside of this if block, you might get this is my var in a block when you're really expecting this is a globally scoped var declared variable. And now let's see what happens if we use let instead. So I'm going to change this to let. I'll call it my let. Call this my let as well. Change this to let and say, of course, let's change this to just to make more sense. And then, of course, we need to change this as well to my let. And so you can see now that in the if block, this variable my let was not overridden. As you can see, what's printed is this is a globally scoped let declared variable, when for var, what was printed was in here. So you can see that even though my var is redefined inside this if block, it keeps its value. So it keeps its value up here. And this is because variables defined by the let keyword are block scoped. And a block is essentially just code that is surrounded by brackets. Anything within curly braces is a block. So you can see these two curly braces here. And a variable declared in a block with the let keyword is only available for use within that block. So to demonstrate this again, let's see what happens if let's just comment out this line here. You can see now we get my let is not defined, because it's defined only within this block, or within these curly braces. But if we did this, for example, uncomment this line, and just log my let, comment out this as well, you can see we get this is a globally scoped let declared variable, because it was declared in this outer block here. So you can essentially think of this whole thing as being, within curly braces between these script tags, and this is why this variable is still accessible within here. And you can even it doesn't have to be some form of statement. So let me just do this, delete all this. Let's just have a regular block. Let's do let soccer equals amazing, and then let's just log soccer here, and then let's also log soccer here. And so of course again we print it within here, but not without here, because it is defined within this block with the let keyword. But if we change this to var, for example, we could get amazing printed twice. And also, because variables defined with let are block scoped, they are not attached to the window object, even if they are not defined explicitly inside a block. So to show you this, let me go back to where we were. And let me set another breakpoint. So within here, let me lower this, set a breakpoint here, refresh the page. Get stuck here, let's type in window. Now say we do window.myLet, you can see undefined, because variables that are declared with let keyword are not attached to the window object, once again, even if they're not defined explicitly inside a block. Let me play this through, get rid of this breakpoint, go back to our console. And now let's start talking about const declaration. So when it comes to scope, const is just like let. So if I do const here, change this to globally scoped const, even though it should technically be block scoped, but you get what I mean. And then let's change this to my const. You can see we get this is a globally scoped const declared variable. Let's do, and then let's also log it out here, like we did before. Except also I forgot to redeclare it in here. Let's do const my const equals this is a block scoped const like this. And if we print it out, you can see we get this is a globally scoped, because this does not override it in here, because just like let, const is block scoped, not function or globally scoped like the var keyword is. So then also another thing I'd show you is if, Like previously, if we declared it in here, it's only available within this block, so we get an uncaught reference error. So that was scope for each of the variables. So let me delete all this. And now let's start talking about redeclaration and updating variables declared with let, const, and var. So variables declared with var can be both redeclared and updated. So let's redeclare a variable with var and just see what happens. So let's do var soccer equals amazing. And then let's declare it again, soccer equals fun. And let's log out soccer like this. You can see what we get is the keyword fun, because variables declared with var can be redeclared. So we are redeclaring soccer here. And now let's see what happens if we want to update it. So let's just get rid of that and type in fun. And we log it out. You can see once again we get fun, because once again, variables declared with var can be both redeclared and updated. But on the other hand, let can be updated, but it cannot be redeclared. So let's do let soccer equals amazing and let soccer equals fun. Save this. You can see we get a syntax error saying soccer has already been declared. So we can't redeclare it, but then let's just update it. And you can see that we successfully just log fun. So we can update a variable declared with let. And also just to mention, of course, this is all happening within the same scope. So we're talking about redeclaring and updating a variable within the same scope. Because we saw, for example, that we could, for example, do let soccer equal, pizza in here. And if we run this, we won't get it without any error. But if we remove these braces, then now they're in the same scope. And if we save that, then we get that error. So just to, don't know if I mentioned that, but this is also assuming that they are updating and being redeclared within the same scope. But now let's talk about const. So let me actually just move back up here. So const cannot be updated or redeclared. And this of course makes sense, as const is short for constant, and you shouldn't be able to update or redeclare a variable that is constant. So let's first try to redeclare it. So we have const soccer equals amazing. Let's do const soccer equals good. And let's do this. And you can see we get identifier soccer has already been declared. Now let's just try and update it. So let's do this. And we get assignment to constant variable, because this is saying constant, so soccer is not going to be changed, which is why we get, of course, this error, because if it's constant, we shouldn't be expecting to reassign it or update it to anything else. It should be amazing throughout the whole program. So const is essentially the opposite of var when it comes to redeclaration and updating a variable. A var variable can be both redeclared and updated, as we saw, while const cannot be redeclared and also not updated, as we just saw. However, as a side note, using const with objects behaves a little differently, because in JavaScript, objects are stored as references. So let me show you this real quick. So if I assign this to an object, I just say, let's just do my key, my value, like this, you may think that we are updating the variable if we say add another key to the object. So say we did soccer.hi equals pizza. But what we are doing here is we aren't actually changing the value of const, because it's holding a reference to that object, not the actual object itself. So somewhere in memory, it's holding basically a pointer to this object that contains these properties. So we're just adding on to that object, but we are not actually changing what soccer is referencing. However, if we try and assign const to another object reference, for example, that is an update, so an error will be thrown. So say we have this here. Now we do const pizza equals an object, let's say my key, set that equal to my value. And now we set soccer equal to pizza like this. We will get assignment to constant variable. And of course, also, if we did it with just a string or something like that, we would get the same thing. But now, the final difference between these three declaration types I want to talk about is hoisting. And hoisting is a mechanism in JavaScript where variables and function declarations are moved to the top of their scope before code is executed. And this, of course, will make more sense with an example. So let me remove all this and know that var variables are hoisted to the top of their scope and initialized with a value of undefined. So let me show you this by, let's say we log a variable pizza before we declare it. So we do var pizza equals pizza. If we run this, you can see we get logged undefined because var variables are hoisted to the top of their scope, which here is a global scope, of course, and initialized with a value of undefined. And just like var, let is hoisted to the top of its scope as well. However, unlike var, so let me change this to let. So unlike var, which is initialized to undefined, the let keyword is not initialized at all. So let's run this. And you can see we get cannot access pizza before initialization. So you can see here that we get a reference error if we try and log out a hoisted variable declared with let. And also, just like let, const declarations are hoisted to the top of the page but aren't initialized either. So if I did const like this, we would get the same thing. So once again, we are given a reference error. However, as const is supposed to reference a variable that won't change, it must be initialized at the time of declaration. So say we have, just like this, const pizza, and then we set it equal to that like this, we get an error for missing initializer in const declaration. So you can see that if we don't initialize a constant variable, we will get a syntax error saying missing initializer in const declaration. But so overall, the main purpose of the let and const statements is to free up memory when not needed in a certain block. So in other words, it is encouraged that variables exist only when they are needed. So let and const are better choices than var in most circumstances. But so this was my video on let, var, and const. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. I'll try and get back to you. But besides that, that was the video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.